In the Aseres Adibros, we have one of the most powerful of the Dibros, and we'll see soon exactly in what sense. It says, Lo sisa eshem Hashem al kechalashov. You shall not carry, invoke God's name for naught. Ki lo yinaka Hashem es yisa shmei lashav. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not cleanse the person who invokes his name for naught. That's a rough translation of it. It is the third of the Aseres Hadibros. Chazal over here, the Gemara says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu uttered these words, the world shook. And the description of that is because it says here, Lo Yenake, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not cleanse, meaning that tshuva has limited efficacy and is really possibly, it affects a person, his family, many, many terrible things about Lo Sisa Hashem Hashem Kechalashov. So let's try first to, in broad strokes, explain the halacha behind this, or the relevant halacha, and we'll try to explain why it's like that. So, the Torah speaks specifically of lashav, for naught. Now, the Gemara says there are a few ways in which an oath is for naught. So first of all, we're talking about not someone who mentions Hashem's name plain, which one ought not to do. One ought not to mention HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name for nothing. But the prohibition and this Aseres Hadibros specifically deals with an oath carrying Hashem's name. Now, what does it mean, lashav? It does not mean swearing falsely. Swearing falsely has its own prohibition, and that's called a shvua sheker. So a person who takes an oath that he knows to be untrue, the person it says that such and such a thing happened and it never happened, or vice versa. Or if a person promises under an oath to do something and he doesn't do it, so those are all shvua sheker. However, shvua shav is something very specific, and it means that the person says that he is going to, a person swears on something that is ludicrous. For instance, a person will swear that it's now day when it's night. A person will swear it's day when it's day, when it's not contested. In other words, it is absolutely purposeless. Or if a person swears he will not do a certain mitzvah, which halachically does not take effect. So there's something over here very unique about swearing a meaningless oath. That is the halachic definition of it. If a person swears falsely, it does not seem to be included in this category. But that's not 100% accurate. The Gemara says that swearing falsely is a terrible thing because the whole world shook when Hashem said, Lo sishem kechalashov, like we said before. The Gemara says it, and Tosfos uses this to convey a halachic point. The halachic point is that a person who may not be believed in court without taking an oath, meaning we suspect that the person is not honest and he wants to steal, which is an aveira, big aveira in its own right. However, if he swears, we do believe him. Why? So Tosfos says, because it's such a terrible sin that the entire world shook. So if the entire world shook, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put it down in such severe terms, then chances are that the person will be telling the truth. So Rabbi Kivega actually asks, doesn't that apply only to a shvua shav, like we said before? Doesn't it only apply to an oath that is given for naught, not false? We don't have a clear answer to that, but it seems as if the general idea is included in that. It seems as if there is an overarching sense that any type of oath is something extraordinarily terrible, much worse than the possible, than any other possible avera. And even though specifically it speaks about shav, it includes false oaths as well. So we have a prohibition that it's clear. Its clear definition is a useless, purposeless oath. Its broader definition is an oath that is false, and therefore the oath is not really carrying out the purpose it's supposed to. Because of this terrible, terrible prohibition, people were reluctant even to take an oath that was 100% true because of something so terrible about it that they would stay away from it. And Chazal say it's appropriate. It was appropriate to try to stay away from having to swear any type of oath, even if a person is 100% positive and the oath is for the right purpose. But be it as it may, that's the halacha, and that is the included under this umbrella of Lo Sisa Shem Hashem Lekech L'Shav. Now, what we need to understand a bit is why. What is it about this that's so unique? So imagine the following. A person is suspect of stealing something. A person is ready to steal something. He'll steal something. He'll steal $1,000. Now, in the process, he's also going to lie in court. So the stealing is the sin. The lying was the means. So it would be hard for us to identify the lying as being not only did he steal, but he lied in order to steal. The stealing is what the problem is. But here, it's much worse. The person, and it seems as if the Tosfos considers this to be normal, that a person would be less afraid of the stealing than of the oath that he's swearing falsely. So I'll try a little bit to explain what is this extraordinary aveir over here, and why is it called a shvua shav. It's also something we in our understanding, a shvua sheker would possibly be worse than shvua shav. If a person swears it's daytime now, and as you can see, it is daytime when I'm recording this, so I mean, there's no point to it, but I'm telling the truth, as opposed to a shvua sheker, which is distorting the truth. So let's think a little bit about it. One more halachic point I'd like to mention is, even though the pasuk uses the word Shem Hashem, God's name, it may be that an oath, if it's said with the language of an oath, even if it does not overtly contain Hashem's name, may have the properties of an oath. If a person says, I swear such and such, even if he didn't mention Hashem's name, there's an implication, because every oath is associated with Hashem's name, and that's a point that we're going to address. So we have over here the third Aseres Hadibros. Comes before murder, comes before Shabbos, it comes before adultery. So the first two are the basis of faith, that we understand. One would expect the next one might be Shabbos, because Shabbos sort of belongs to the class of things that uphold the faith. Shabbos has a very severe punishment. The punishment per se is more severe than oaths. And yet the third one is Shavua, an oath that's administered that is in vain. And the word in vain, as opposed to false, is the way it's labeled, even if it includes the false shavua. So let's try a bit to understand this point over here. In the human action, the Sfarim list 3 levels. There is thought, there is speech, and then there is deed. And Sfarim speak about this when they're talking about the different types of Averas. So we understand thinking because that's the essence of a person. If a person is not thinking when he does something, so he may not even be liable, could be. On Shabbos, if you pass by a switch and you just brush by the switch and it went on by itself, you had no thought of even doing it, that's called misasek, so that's nothing. A person who is sleeping has very limited liability, except for certain monetary issues. But generally speaking, das of a person's understanding, cognizance, awareness is critical. On the other hand, deeds speak louder than words. Deeds are what it's about. The world of mitzvah is really, really all about doing. The vast majority of mitzvahs are actions. And therefore, we understand the significance of deeds that are good mitzvahs as opposed to averos. But what exactly is speech? Why is speech so important? Now, man is called a medaber, the one who speaks. There's a very famous Targum Onkelos that says, Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, that man became a living soul. He calls it ruach memalala, a spirit that speaks. So he associates speech with the essence of man. And to us, speech is a great gift, but shouldn't intelligence take precedence? Shouldn't man be called the intelligent being? The answer is that speech is unique in that it's able to display the thought process within a physical world. Meaning as follows: the thought process is something that's hidden. Thinking does not occupy any space within the world that we live in. Actions do. But actions can be accidental. They can have many different causes and purposes. A person goes by and he kicks something. Was it absent-minded? Was he trying to hit or hurt someone? Was he aiming at something else? We don't know. All actions that happen do not display the intelligence behind it, except in some sort of vague association. Well, this person hit so-and-so, he probably had a reason, or he meant it, and so on. But we really are at a loss. Speech is like the caption that you put under a picture. You have a picture, and you have, and what is this picture? What I'm trying to show? I show you a picture. You look around, and we're baffled. One of the most annoying things is when they forget to put a caption in a newspaper or something, and you see a picture, and you're trying to figure out what exactly do I see over here. I mean, I see all the details. I see a person, another person, a place, and a this and that. What am I seeing over here? The caption provides the meaning. What is it that I intended to show in this picture? Such and such and such. That is the power of speech. It is the connection between the world of thought, ideas, and cognizance to the world of action. It is the bridge that turns actions into purposeful, meaningful items. If we're to ask ourselves, of all of the elements of mitzvahs that we do, what are the most important parts of it? Well, we do a lot of mitzvahs. So a person, let's say, is resting on Shabbos. Resting on means not doing malachas and so on. That's great. It's a testimony to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He created the world in 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. But is that why I'm resting? I'm wearing tzitzis. That's nice. Maybe it's just I picked up a shawl at some New Mexican stall someplace, and they had these lovely shawls with fringes coming out. What is it? All of these items are lacking. What I know and understand is great, but only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what is it that I know and understand. So really, in a certain sense, Dibur is the part of a person that actually gives meaning. This is why Chazal made a bracha on mitzvahs. It's not like Birchas Hanehanin, the brachas we make on things we enjoy, where the purpose is to sort of thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, demonstrate that we appreciate it, and so on. We're doing a mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said I should put on tefillin. I'm putting on tefillin. But the saying the bracha is what gives the mitzvah its expressed meaning. When a person, when a person does the mitzvahs, that's where Dibur comes in. The Mekubalim added the L'Shem Yichud. Shem Yichud are all sorts of ideas of how this particular mitzvah is doing the ultimate good in the higher worlds. Saying it invests it in the action that I'm doing. That is the purpose of stating and saying what I'm doing. If we take a look at the Aseres HaDibros, the Aseres HaDibros are first two mitzvahs of Aseres HaDibros deal with appropriate beliefs. Anochi is the belief in Hashem and Echad and all of that, and Loyeh is the not believing in any type of idols. Those are the first two mitzvahs, rightfully so. The third mitzvah is Shabbos. Shabbos is the mitzvah that describes in its activities a confirmation of these beliefs. And then we have, after Shabbos, we have Kibbur Av, which is there to tell me about the people who represent, or parallel, so to speak, to Hashem in this world, the people who brought us into this world the way Hashem did. And then we have Averis that we shouldn't do, and so on. That's the framework of the Aseres HaDibros. The Losisa, Shem Hashem Kechal Lashav, stands exactly between the mitzvahs of thought to the mitzvahs of action, because that's exactly what it represents. It is the mitzvah that applies to speech and tells us that we are doing something that is connecting those two the same way speech does. Now, let's be a little bit more specific about a certain aspect of it. I'm going to quote a Ramban in Parshas Matos. The Ramban speaks about the difference between a neder. A neder is a prohibition on an object that I make, and a shavua is an oath, I will do this, I will do that. It's complex, and it's not the point I want to address here, but I do want to use a point that he makes. It's quasi-Kabbalistic, but I think we can understand it in a way that we can use it to understand this point better. He says the word Shavua comes from the word Shiva, which is 7. And it refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's basic interaction with this world. What we call 7 spheros are a way of breaking down HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interactions in this world in 7 different ways. And that's where the mystical number 7, the number 7 that recurs so much in the Torah, it's always seen as being parallel. And what he says basically is, what's understood from Ramban is that whenever a person makes a shavua, a person is connecting this world to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's in effect saying, just as Hashem is true and exists always, so too the statement I'm making is true. So too I will do thus and thus. So too I will not do thus and thus. In other words, he's adding, and Ramban is referring more specifically to shvuos that are in the nature of doing something or not doing something, as opposed to shvuas shav. And what the person is doing is applying, as it were, that from this point onwards, this too shall be obligated to do, this too shall be prohibited to do. So that is that's what the essence of a shvu is. So in a certain sense, a person is taking this connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to this world and was given the power to mimic it and to apply it in other areas as well. It has in itself an element of Kiddush Hashem, because every time I swear 100% truthfully, it means I'm extending and I'm saying, just as Hashem is true, all true, so too this is true, this is true, this is true. And that is a sort of a positive thing, even though one ought not to take any oaths, but at least in that sense, what I'm doing is I'm mimicking HaKadosh Baruch Hu's emes and implying it. However, if a person swears falsely, let's take falsely first, person promises to do something and willfully does not do it, a person swears about the truth of something that's not true, then what a person is doing in a sense is breaking the connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to this world. Like we said before, speech is what connects the two. A physical parallel is that the neck, from where speech sort of emanates, connects the head to the body. So when we say one thing and do another thing, what we're saying is that there is no connection. I think of one thing and I do another thing. And that's why Shavua is such a terrible sin. But it goes further. And this is why Shvuas Shav, which means for naught, is a type of Shavua that is listed in our parsha. A person who, if we ask ourselves, what is the Bria all about? What is creation all about? What does it mean there is intelligent design? There's a creator. So on Shabbos we say, Tachlis, Shemayim V'Aretz. Shabbos is the Tachlis, the goal of the purpose of everything that was created. It's a Tachlis Ma'aseh Shemayim V'Aretz. It is the very goal. It's the purpose of it. Things that happen by accident have no purpose. Things that are done by design have a purpose. If a person, let's say, is nuts and he does odd things for no reason, then in a certain sense, that's also coincidence. Just like if the wind came and blew a tree down for no reason. So we cannot call that an intelligent act. If somebody psychotic came and chopped a tree down for no reason, then it's also a meaningless act. And the word purposeful, intelligent is kind of similar, or if not the same. So when we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a world, it doesn't only mean that he's the origination of the world. It means he created for a purpose. It is one of the reasons why the Rambam viscerally disagreed with Muslim philosophy. Muslims seem to present themselves as ultra religious. They said you cannot, you're not allowed to, and we cannot discern any wisdom behind God's actions, any meaning, and so on. They eschewed any type of understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's doing things, basically painting their sense of a divinity as someone who does things just because he feels like. The way we sort of think of an all-powerful tyrant who has whims and does what he wants. The Muslims saw it as being ultra-religious. He's so above us and beyond us that he's almighty, and therefore he does crazy things the way that they projected, in a certain sense, an image. The Rambam writes very strongly against this, and that's why mitzvahs that are chok should never be translated as mitzvahs that have no purpose. That would be the work of a crazy one. They are mitzvahs whose purpose is not understood with our mind. Everything has a purpose. That's almost axiomatic. The divine certainly has a purpose. Some of the purposes we have an understanding, some we have somewhat of understanding, and some we have no understanding whatsoever. But it certainly has a tachlis. Shabbos is there to teach us that everything in creation, it's not enough to say on Sunday Hashem created light, and on Monday the Rakia, and on Tuesday the Desha and the Yamim. Shabbos tells us HaKadosh Baruch Hu created also a tachlis, because that's almost the definition of creation. We understand it. It was something brought into this world for a reason. The opposite of that is shav, for naught. And Esav, Chazal say Esav, who's the antithesis of Yaakov, is not called sheker. He's called shav. Ru'u shav barasi. Look at this creature that seems to be for naught. The word Esav, it's a play on the word Esav, coming from the word shav. So Yaakov's midah was emes, but Esav, the antithesis of Yaakov, is shav. It's much, much deeper falsehood. When somebody does something, somebody says something and it's not true, that's false. But when somebody does something and it's empty of meaning, that is in a very deep way the ultimate falsity. It's meaningless. It looks like it's something, but it's nothing. So if a person sets a table and it looks as if guests are coming and nothing's happening, no one's coming, no one's this, he sets a whole table, the falsehood about it is a lot deeper than if I were to say so-and-so is coming. There's a hollowness in creation. And that's why Shabbos is such an important day, and that's why it's the next Dibra, because Shabbos first and foremost tells us that there's a Tachlis Ma'aseh Shemayim. The world has a purpose. Shvua Shav means I use Hashem's name for naught. I try to marry Hashem to Shav, and there is no greater profanation than that. because the antithesis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Shav. And the place where it manifests itself is in Dibur. Because Dibur, speech, is supposed to be the vehicle to attach meaning to my actions. So if somebody sees me setting the table and he asks me, what are you doing? I'm saying I'm doing it because guests are coming. Or I could say I'm practicing so that when guests come, I'll know how to set the table. Or I'm doing it because someone asked me to do it. The speech is what gives the purpose. It pastes the caption of purpose onto the act that I'm doing. And therefore, immediately after the first Averas, we now have this terrible, terrible Avera. And that's why it's in a league on its own. When someone does something for a purpose, but it's skewed, it's not honest, it's not true, that's a sin. So if a person steals, it's a sin. But if a person introduces Hashem's name into the world, l'shav, it's not just that I lied as a means to get to something. I've hollowed out the connection between Hashem to the Bria, and that's where I've gone wrong. So let's sum up the points we've made, because this is obviously an extraordinarily important dibra of the third dibra of Sasa Dibras. And we explained, first of all, that the specific meaning of Shvua Shav is an oath that has no purpose. It's an oath that is either ludicrous. I swore that I flew on a broomstick last night. That shvua is not a sheker, it's a shav. It's much worse than a sheker. It's meaningless. Or if I swear that humans walk on 2 feet, that is an absolutely purposeless statement. There is also shvua sheker, which is a prohibition. It seems to stand as a branch of this, under the same umbrella of being a terrible deed, but a step removed from it. So it's the same idea of bad, but the Torah specifically points at the shav. We explained what exactly is this dibra over here. The first 2 Asar Dibras deal with the positive and negative beliefs that are true. The belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the disbelief in any other power or force in the world. Those are the 2 pillars on which the rest of Torah and all of Yiddishkeit stands on. We then have, skipping where we're holding, the 4th one is Shabbos, which is the first manifestation of Emunah in the world of mitzvahs. And then we have many more mitzvahs, kibbud av. We also said it's similar and so on. Shavua occupies a gap between the 2. We explained that Shavua has to do with speech. There is thought, speech, and deed. Thought is the root of everything, but it's hidden, and there's no way we can ever know what a person is thinking. We have actions, which are the most important, they're the accomplishments, but we never are sure how to define or describe actions. And finally, we have the dibur that connects the 2. When a person speaks and says something, it shows the intent and it labels the point and purpose of what he's doing. I am now attaching wires because I want to set up the lighting system, or whatever it is. That is the koach hadibur. When a person does a shvua, the Ramban says he is mimicking Hashem's dibur. So just like all of Torah is a description of what it is that Hashem wants to do, and it gives meaning to all the events that happened, when a person says a shvua, he's able to do the same. He's able to take his understanding and cognizance and sort of apply it to the deeds that he's doing or will do or won't do and so on. Anything wrong over there is a very fundamental wrong, because it's sort of, by mimicking Hashem and turning it to shav, a person is undermining Hashem's speaking to us. We said that shav is the deepest. It's the deepest opposite of emes. Sheker means it happens to be not true. Shav means it is totally devoid of meaning. Emes means everything Hakadosh Baruch Hu created has meaning. There's Hashem in it. And shav says it is meaningless. And therefore, it is an avera that is so terrible, because we're using Hashem's name, we're applying it in a way that's meaningless. So in a certain sense, we're projecting the fact that there can be meaningless activities, chas v'shalom, in the world, that Hashem could bring things into this world that are meaningless. That's what I'm doing, because by using Hashem's name flippantly, that's what I'm projecting. Sheker is bad. It's also wrong because it hollows out the dibur, but it's not quite as insidious as is shav. Shav is where we really see it as being hollow. We show that Yaakov and Yaakov is the pillar of emes. The opposite of Yaakov is Esav, who's shav. That is the command. That is the dibra of the third dibra of Leisis Hashem Hashem Akecha Leshav. By extension, because it's such a terrible act of desecration, it is appropriate that a person stay away from any type of swearing, even if it's true, because a person can never know 100%. A person is sort of playing with fire. So that's why in contemporary Bate Dinim, we do not administer oaths. We stay away from it, and Chazal speak very strongly about how cities were destroyed even when people swore truthfully. It's something that's a very, very slippery slope. But the koach of Shvuah is an incredible koach. We were given the ability to mimic the most fundamental expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. That's how great man is, that we're given that ability. And that's why there's such a responsibility that chas v'shalom, we don't take Shem Hashem l'shav, and that we uphold the integrity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's action in this world, that everything in this world has meaning, purpose, and is kol kulo emes.